Last week, you had names like Bijan Robinson, Rico Dowdle, Drake London, George Pickens. These guys went off in fantasy football, and they helped you win your matchup. In today's video, I'm going to talk about 10 players that will do the same, but for week 7 this week, as well as have a couple desperation flexes at the end, so you guys who are in injury trouble will have startable names. Let's start off with Quinshon Judkins. I just think he is going to tear a new one in that Dolphins defense this week. I mean, all the stars are aligned for Judkins to just go absolutely sicko mode on this defense, right? Okay, so first off, the Dolphins are the 5th best matchup for your fantasy running back this year. They give up the most rushing yards per game. Almost 170 rushing yards per game. It's great. They got like 3rd, 4th stringers out there on defense. They got guys that might not make the practice squad for other teams. They're terrible. They give up the 3rd most yards per game to opposing offenses, the 4th most total points allowed. Check this out, like Ramondre Stevenson. Yes, Ramondre Stevenson, the guy who's been averaging like 2 yards per carry in the last 2 weeks, he had 142 yards against this defense, right? Great names like Cook, Hall, they had over 5.5 yards per carry, great days in fantasy. Names like Rico Dowdle had 9 yards per carry, 32 points. Kamani Vidal, 22.8 points. We had never seen Kamani do anything relevant in fantasy football. Last week, he went absolutely crazy against this defense. And for the first time, probably the last time this year, the Browns are favored in an NFL game. That's right, they're favored against Miami at home. Judkins has been playing at a very high level. He's one of those running backs that are top 5 in rushing yards over expectation, kind of per attempt. Shout out to Datarama for that information. I'm projecting at least 120 all-purpose yards and a top 12 finish for him. I think he's going to go crazy. Maybe his best day ever as a pro. All right, that takes me to my spicy hot bold take of the week. Now, I'll be honest with you guys, we have not been hitting on these hot takes lately. I mean, we had the kid, Woody Marks, balls out again. Bill Krosky-Merritt last week, but am I ready to be hurt again? Absolutely. Bill Krosky-Merritt is going to run all over the Bears defense. But let's turn it around here in week 7, all right? The old man himself, Davante Adams, is going to turn the clock back, put up 100 yards, and a top 6 wide receiver finish in London town, okay? A London ting. He goes up against the Jaguars, who are the 10th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. The Jags right now, their defense is really good, but their rush defense is where they're best. They give up the 3rd most passing yards per game and the 10th most total yards per game. You can see previous days where like superstars like Jamar Chase, Nico Collins, JSN, they had huge days against this defense. Now, here's what's really interesting. Davante spends most of his time out wide for the Rams, and no team in fantasy gives up more points per game than the Jags to outside wide receivers. Obviously, we all expect Puka Nacua to miss this week. Even if he doesn't somehow, and it's some miraculous miracle, by the time you're watching this, he's probably rolled out. But if he somehow is out there, he's probably going to be a decoy more than anything. And even with Puka Nacua on the field, Davante Adams is already averaging 9.2 targets per game. That is 7th most in the NFL. This is just the beauty of a Sean McVay offense. I cannot wait to see him featured as the wide receiver 1 in a Sean McVay offense. Again, top 6 finish for him, over 100 yards this week. Okay, my quarterback streamer of the week. Maybe is it a streamer? He's more of like a starter every week. Now that's Caleb Williams versus the Saints. All right, my quarterback 7 this week. New Orleans is the 8th best matchup for your fantasy quarterback. They give up the 8th most total points per game. In the last 3 weeks, Mac Jones had almost 22 points in a 4-point passing touchdown format. Jackson Dart had a fine day. Drake May had 3 tuds over 27 fantasy points. And the Bears have the 4th highest implied team point total of the week, just behind the Chiefs, Lions, and Commanders. And Caleb low-key has already been one of the highest performing quarterbacks in fantasy this year. 17 or more fantasy points in 4 out of 5 games so far. He's averaging almost 21 points per game, averaging more than Jaden Daniels, Justin Herbert, Jordan Love. So I'm projecting 270 yards and at least 2 touchdowns. I think he's going to have a really nice day. Okay, look, so before this next take, I understand last week was disappointing. He might be one of the best rushers in the NFL, point blank period, of any team. However, we are going to put Bill Krosky-Merritt straight back into our lineups, okay? He faces the Dallas Cowboys this week. And again, last week, let's talk about it. I know the fantasy points weren't there. I know it was disappointing. The big plays weren't there. They weren't opening up. But his utilization is what we have all dreamed of since the Bill Krosky hype began. This is what you dreamed would happen. Last week, Career high snap percentage, 67% in this offense. 71% career high rushing attempt share. Career high route participation. Chris Rodriguez is basically uninvolved completely in this offense. It's just, the only time JCM comes off the field is if it's a 2-minute drill or passing down for Jeremy McNichols. Last week, JCM had a higher utilization rate than Breece Hall, James Cook, J.K. Dobbins, Quinshon Judkins. You're not going to bench any of those guys in a bad matchup, right? If they have a bad matchup, they're still in your lineup. Why would you bench Bill in a good matchup? All right, he's still one of those running backs that is performing over expectation. And this week, he faces the Cowboys, which give up the 4th most rushing yards per game, the most total yards per game, the 2nd most points allowed per game. Him and Jaden Daniels should be on a tear. Josh Jacobs had 31 points. Breece Hall with 17. Rico Dowdle last week, 34 fantasy points. It's the highest over-under of the week at 54.5 points. That's the highest over-under we've seen this year. Vegas is telling you the most fantasy points this year should come from this matchup, right? 3rd highest implied team point total on the week as well for the Commanders. And look, I understand the fumbles are concerning. To be very clear, he did not fumble twice last week. He fumbled once. And yes, that's on him. He needs to clean that up. But after that fumble, the team put him right back into the game. They let him get a carry. They're going to continue to trust him. They've already talked about this. The second carry, Jaden Daniels quotes, "I lost the ball completely. It was my fault. I didn't even give Bill a chance, so it was my fault." Right? That was when the weather was a problem. But all indications point towards a really good fantasy day. He has to go and do it, obviously, but everything is lined up for a good day. I'm projecting at least 16 touches, 80 yards, and a top 15 finish. Look, guys, it feels like every week is a battle zone for fantasy football with the injuries and trade rumors and cuts. If you want my latest up-to-date rankings as soon as I hit submit, both for weekly rankings and rest of season, then become a season pass member with my promo code LAND. You can check that out in the description. You'll be supporting the show. You'll also get, obviously, all the rankings, all the premium tools on the Flock site, like the trade calculator, and some vouchers to come on our live streams and ask me some questions about your team. Check that out in the description below. Okay. The last time we talked about this player on this video series, it worked out really well. That's Nico Collins. Last time we talked about him, week 3 versus the Jaguars, and that was his best day of the year. So we got a good track record so far with Nico. Let's continue that. He's going to go off versus the Seahawks. 6th best matchup for your fantasy wide receiver. The Seahawks give up the 9th most passing yards per game and the 2nd fewest rushing yards per game. You want to attack this defense through the air. And in the last 3 weeks, Marvin Harrison had his best day this year. Emeka Egbuka, whatever you say, anyway, 31 fantasy points. Brian Thomas, 23 fantasy points. And this team is dealing with a ton of injuries, right? Their entire secondary is dealing with injuries. Their defense is struggling. I'm projecting 6 catches and at least 100 yards for Nico Collins. All right, a running back you can play with some confidence this week, J.K. Dobbins versus those New York Giants. The Giants are the 8th best matchup when you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed. They give up the 11th most rushing yards per game, the 5th most total yards per game. Previously, we've had great, performances from Bill Krosky-Merritt, Javonte Williams, Amarion Hampton against this defense. The Broncos are 7-point favorites. And I know this New York team has been really feisty, right? They've been so fun to watch. I got to admit, even as a Washington fan, it's been fun to watch this team. But they're in Denver. I think that's a different story when you're in Denver as a rookie quarterback on the road facing the Denver Broncos in Mile High. So I think we'll see a good controlled game from the Broncos. I'm projecting 15 touches and a touchdown for J.K. Dobbins. Okay, the 7th player I think you can start with confidence this week is Ladd McConkey versus the Colts. I don't care if Quentin Johnson is out there or not. This is a great matchup. The Colts give up the 2nd most points to fantasy wide receivers. Again, when you look at schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed, that's according to 4for4. And things are kind of finally starting to turn around for Ladd McConkey. A lot of that has to do with his usage in the red zone. From weeks 1 to 5, he had 3 total red zone targets. Last week, week 6, he had 3 red zone targets in one single week. So things are starting to turn around for him. He's starting to be more featured in the high value fantasy football areas. This is the 3rd highest over under of the week. The Chargers are a top 7 implied team point total on the week. So I think you can put him out there with confidence. I can't really project a touchdown with him because this Chargers offense is so sporadic, but I'm projecting at least 6 catches and 80 yards. That's a really good baseline for Ladd McConkey. Okay, so the next 3 players, actually 4 players that we'll talk about here, they don't necessarily fit the title of this video, but I like, and tell me if you guys want me to stop doing this, but I like including options that are more like desperation flexes for you guys who are in a tough spot this week with injuries and buys, right? So I'm going to give you 4 names that you can start in the flex if you're in a tough spot. Starting off with the tight end, Mason Taylor versus the Panthers. I know that sounds crazy. I think you can start him this week. The Panthers are the second best matchup for your fantasy tight end. In the last 3 weeks, Jake Ferguson, 12 points. Darren Waller, 18 points. Hunter Henry, 12 points. And even though Mason Taylor had 0 targets last week, if you watch that game, Justin Fields never had a chance to throw the ball. But even with that in mind, right, if you account for last week, in the last 3 weeks, he still has a higher utilization rate than names like A.J. Barner or Harold Fannin, Kyle Pitts, Tucker Kraft, and even better for him, bad for the Jets, Garrett Wilson is not going to be out there this week, right? He's going to miss some time. So we've seen previous games where he's had over 10 targets. Mason Taylor, I'm projecting 8 targets and a top 12 finish. He's a playable name. Okay, at number 9, I think most of you are going to hate me for saying this, but I think there are worse starts this week than Ramondre Stevenson versus the Titans. And I want to apologize in advance for even mentioning his name, but the Titans are the 4th best matchup for your fantasy running backs. You attack this team on the ground. They give up the 8th most rushing yards per game. They give up the 13th fewest passing yards per game. So not elite by any means, but they're still a much better passing defense than rushing defense. We've seen great days this year from J.K. Dobbins against the Titans, Woody Marks against the Titans, Michael Carter. I mean, a lot of these guys are not superstars in the NFL. Ramondre can have a fine day against this defense. The Pats are 7-point favorites in Tennessee. Mike Vrabel revenge game. How do you think he's going to want to run the offense? He's going to want to ground and pound and make it really hard for Titans fans to watch. Patriots have the 10th highest implied team point total on the week. And look, just like you guys, I love TreVeyon Henderson just as much as the next guy. I hate each and every week seeing Ramondre Stevenson get opportunities no matter how bad he is or how bad, the situation looks. But last week was TreVeyon Henderson's lowest snap rate of the entire season. So it seems like there's more work going to Stevenson than Henderson with the loss of Antonio Gibson. I'm projecting at least 16 touches and 80 plus all-purpose yards for Stevenson. And I know that sounds crazy, but he's a desperation play. What is he, my RB 27? Is that right? Yeah. So you can play him. So what I've done is I've taken some of the names in today's video and I've created a DFS lineup. For example, Judkins, I'm giving 2 times bonus in my lineup. Rashee Rice, we didn't talk about today, but I'm excited to see him back, so I want to play him in a lineup. We've got Ladd there, we've got JCN there, and a little Bijan and Drake London action. But you can create your own lineup here, have fun, choose 6 non-quarterbacks. If you've never downloaded the FastDraft app, download the app, use my promo code LAND. I'll match your deposit up to $50, and then you'll get my week 7 rankings completely free. And then check out the Quick 6 Super Slam contest to submit your own lineup. But make it unique, right? Don't make it exactly like mine. Okay, 2 names to end the stream, and I really want to be a part of this matchup. If you're in a tough spot, then you consider these guys as, desperation flexes. That is Sterling Shepard and Cade Otton. If you're struggling at tight end, you have no idea who to start Cade Otton this week. If you're like me in the Flock League and you're struggling at wide receiver and you need another flex, I might start Cade Otton this week. They face the Detroit Lions, okay? It's the 4th best matchup for your wide receivers, decent against tight ends. The Lions are dealing with so many injuries, and anybody who watched the Chiefs game last week, I mean, it was Swiss cheese in that secondary. Mahomes is Mahomes, but he was tearing that secondary apart. Baker Mayfield is a very talented quarterback. No Mike Evans. Well, we'll see. I don't know if Mike Evans is going to play or not. Regardless, you can still play these guys. Obviously, it's better if there's no Mike Evans, right? But definitely no Emeka Egbuka. Definitely no Chris Godwin. So there are going to be opportunities. It doesn't help the Lions that with all the injuries they also have Brian Branch out for the week with his crazy situation that he had in Kansas City. Good news, 2nd highest over-under of the week. The Lions are heavy favorites, so we anticipate the Bucs needing to throw throughout this game. My projections here, at least 5 catches for Shepard and a top 34 finish. 5 catches, 50 yards for Otton, that's 10 PPR points, top 12-ish finish, right? So those are guys that you can play if you're in a difficult position. But guys, I appreciate you watching the video. Do me a favor, hit that like button to show some love. Subscribe if you like the content, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Nothing but love. Draft with me every night this week on the FastDraft app where there are thousands of dollars to be won weekly. Getting started is easy. Download the FastDraft app, use the promo code LAND at signup to get your deposit match up to $50. That's up to 10 free entries on us. And when you finish your first DFS contest, I'll send you my weekly rankings completely free. Check out the link in the pinned comment to start drafting today.